thank you, everybody, for coming back after the first one. Always kind of wonder whether somebody's going to. But here we go. We are in a risky business. And one of the best things that we can do to reduce our risk is to have better agreements and better reporting. So that's what we're going to talk about until around lunch. Again, same thing. I want to make it a conversation and not me droning on. Questions are very much welcomed. We'll do them the same last time. We're not going to get through everything in under 2 hours, so we'll just go through as much as we can. So I want to ask what unfortunately in this kind of environment is going to be a somewhat rhetorical question. What business are we really in? Now, a lot of you are going to say home inspection, and that's partly right, but not entirely. We are actually in the communication business. And think about that for a minute. Nobody, let me go back to that for a second. Except for the occasional engineer, nobody really cares about the home inspection. They care about the results of the home inspection. And the results of the home inspection are how are communicated. So in that sense, we are not really in the home inspection business. The home inspection is simply the means, to the end. The end is communicating with our clients. What do we communicate? This is critical, absolutely critical. We communicate information clients can use to make decisions. They don't care about how we get there. All they care about is that we give them the information that they can use in a form that they can use it so that they can make good informed decisions about what for most is the largest purchase of their lives. So, okay, if you accept that as the business we're in, when do we do it? Well, we communicate a lot before the inspection. All of your communication, your website, your phone, your phone manners and how you do it, everything, how you set up the client and set up the inspection is part of of what you're communicating. Certainly, if the client is on site, your communication during the inspection, and of course afterwards. And that's the report. And that's really the critical piece, because if there's a problem, the only place they're going to go is to the report. So what about those demons? Well, rapport with clients. Here's a fairly obvious thing. In most cases, friends don't sue friends. So if you maintain good rapport, even if there is a mistake, they're more likely to work with you. Complaint response, that's a big one. In business long enough, you're going to get a complaint. How you respond makes a difference. Inspection agreement, you're going to talk about more, and I'm going to go through my piece of it really fast because that's what you're going to be covering this afternoon. It's a key piece. And then unprofessional reports. That is what kills a lot of inspectors. So we talked about friends don't usually sue friends. I know, and this does change with COVID a little bit, and that's understandable. But sooner or later, we're going to go into a post-COVID world. Encouraging clients' attendance at the inspection is really smart, and you really should be doing it. It's establishing that rapport, establishes you as a them as a referral source. And eventually what we want to do, ideally, is get away from realtors as our primary referral source. So you want to be professional. You know, how you wear, how you act, all of it. You are the professional on site. Talk with the clients. That's important. If you're talking to them, and it makes it hard to make that rapport with them. You've gotten a complaint. You pick up that phone, and we've all had it. This is Mary Smith. You did an inspection for me 3 months ago, and all of a sudden, it's Ray Shields. Arm photon torpedoes, charge the phaser banks, get ready for battle. Well, that's exactly the wrong response, although it's very natural, and I feel it too. But I try really hard to fight that feeling. A lot of times, all people want is to be heard. So just actively listen and sympathetically listen. Ask questions. Ask what the real issue is. But, and this is really important, unfortunately, in this litigious world, don't ever admit fault and don't apologize, because that can be interpreted as admitting fault. You can say, I understand, that's interesting. There are a lot of ways to respond neutrally to people without admitting fault, and either overtly by saying, yeah, that looks like I missed that, or unintentionally and just saying, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, the lawyers make that difficult. So I'm just going to go through this again, because I think you'll get a lot of this. If you do settle, it is critical that you get a full release for the entire inspection, not just the issues that the client is raising. There's a sample on the ASHI website for ASHI members. It's a fairly simple document. If you carry errors and omissions insurance, get with your E&O people, and the inspector folks will be talking about that. If you don't settle, make sure you have good documentation, as good as you can, about the complaint. If you're insured, like I said, absolutely report it to the insurance company immediately. There's a difference between reporting an incident and reporting a claim, and I'm sure the inspector pro folks will get into that. So I'm going to go through this part of it quickly, because I think you'll get more of it later. Now, one, this is required in North Carolina, but it's a really good idea.
In Virginia.
Good. Recommendation, just as soon as the inspection is scheduled, get that inspection agreement out to the client. give them plenty of time to look at it and raise questions. Why? I made him an offer he can't refuse. That's what they're going to complain about if you don't get the agreement there before the inspection. And this is what's called an adhesion contract. You know, that's a legal term that essentially means I made him an offer he can't refuse. It gets to the point where they're going to say, well, you know, you presented it at the inspection. Everybody was there. I felt that I didn't have a choice. I didn't have, you know, an opportunity to negotiate. There was no meeting of the minds, which is required for a contract. Therefore, the contract is void. And they could very easily win on that point alone. Then the contract is thrown out in its entirety. And that's not a good thing. Including your limitation of liability or limitation of remedy clause, which you don't want that thrown out either. So, what do you want in the agreements? Describe the service. It's really important. Inspection scope, and particularly the objectives, what you're trying to achieve, and a lot of good limitations. If you provide ancillary services of radon, just as an example, mold testing, any kind of ancillary service, make sure you get a separate agreement for each service, because those are going to have, separate objectives, separate limitations. It's really important that you not be brought down by a relatively small fee ancillary service where you wind up getting sued. So describe the services, an addendum for each. This is one thing I put in mine. I'll spend a second on it. What I call a contractual deductible. What it basically says is, I'm looking for things that are going to cost more than $1,000 to fix, when performed by a licensed contractor. That's a possible way to at least reduce the chances of these small claims that people try to get you on. There's kind of how I do it. The objective: identify major deficiencies, immediate major repairs. A major deficiency is when a component's not functioning as intended. Immediate major repair, $1,000 when performed, by a licensed contractor. That's a scope limitation on the inspection. You want to make sure that you cite whatever standard of practice you're using.
And Virginia has the standards of practice that we follow. They actually have one that's very specific and published. Yep.
So you want to cite that and incorporate it into your contract, because that pulls all of that into your contract. So it's part of the agreement. So Virginia has a standard of practice. You reference the Virginia standard of practice. Make sure you state the fee, and you state the fee for each ancillary service that you have. Generally, you want to use a limitation of liability clause. Here's some things I've found in reading cases on this. One, explain the rationale. What I do is say, look, for this fee, I can't, it's not a rational business decision for me to provide this service without, this limitation of liability clause. Therefore, part of the consideration is the exchange of value. Part of the exchange of value in this transaction is this limitation of liability clause. You have to make it conspicuous. I put mine in a box. I make it in larger type. Courts absolutely hate limitation of liability clauses that aren't conspicuous. Have the client initial it. That reduces the possibility of them saying, well, I didn't see it. Well, you initialed it. And make it revocable. One of the things courts hate is adhesion contracts and adhesion clauses. What I have in mind is, you don't want that limitation of liability? Fine. I'll remove it for 4 times the fee. So you want to pay me 4 times the fee? I'll remove that limitation of liability. Now, has anybody ever taken me up on that? Nope, because they're not going to pay 4 times the fee. But at least they've got the option. And if they try to say, well, you wouldn't do it without it, you say, well, you had the option to remove it. You chose not to take it. Okay. This is just how I do it. Inspector, this is my limitation. Inspector is subject to risk. It's not practical to perform. Part of the consideration is this limitation of remedies. You can pay 4 times the fee if you want to remove it. And then this is the exclusive remedy, yada, yada, yada. And here's an interesting piece of it. You want to make sure that they can't come back at you and say, well, this limitation only applies to breach of contract. Well, no, this limitation includes all theories. Negligence, negligent misrepresentation, which is another type of tort claim that people are starting to make against inspectors. All claims, including incidental and consequential damages. So it's a pretty comprehensive, essentially risk reduction and limitation of liabilities clause. Now, I'll kind of pause right here. I think I see one hand up. I don't know who R stock is.
Yeah, so go ahead and share your thought or comment, question.
And unmute yourself.
Yeah, Scott, you're on.
Okay, 2 questions. Just clarification. If you could go back a couple of slides to where you had the contractual deductible.
That slide?
I don't know if it was this one. I think it's that one. Yes. So in our language, we use a term called material defect. And I don't know if that's standard for operating within Virginia, and Alex can address that. But a material defect is anything that we identify in that threshold of $1,000 or more. And is that the same thing as a deductible?
Well, it's the same concept as major deficiency.
Okay.
Just different wording.
Okay. And when you said cite the SOP for ASHI, or I'm asking, so is ASHI the standard that we use within Virginia, Alex?
No, Virginia has its standards and it's part of the regulation.
So it's specific to Virginia. It's not necessarily ASHI or
it's similar to InterNACHI and similar to ASHI, but it has some unique components.
Okay, I think I might need to address that with my insurance company.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right,
And you need to, it has, if you have a state standard of practice, I mean, you need to cite the state standard of practice.
Okay, yeah, because I think we go by
Absolutely.
ASHI right now, and that might need to be adjusted accordingly.
Yeah, it will be.
Okay,
We
thank
have-
you.
Yeah, in North Carolina, we have a state standard of practice. I cite the North Carolina standard of practice.
Okay, thank you, guys.
okay,
All
our
right.
stock. Sorry,
Yeah, just a little help is when I send my contracts out, I put in that return receipt requested so that when they get that component in their email, they can just hit the button and acknowledge that they received the inspection contract. And if I don't get something like that back, I usually make a follow-up call to make sure they did get it. So that's one thing, is to send it out. You just also want to make sure that your client got it.
Well, yes, that's good. That doesn't substitute for a signature, but that's
Right.
yeah, but that's a good.
Well, a lot of
good thing,
times,
so they can't whine about
Right.
that. You know, I've got a lot of material to cover. Let me move on. Edward Icona. Remember to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I slid to one side and I can't see the button. Just real quick on the $1,000 repair thing. Does that infer that you're not going to report on anything that wouldn't cost under $1,000?
No, not
Okay.
at all.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, that's a good question, and no, that just sets the floor for complaints. Certainly, I'm going to, if it's within the Virginia standard of practice to report it, I'm going to report it. But at least this is all risk mitigation. It doesn't have anything to do with how you conduct your inspection. But that's an excellent question. Dylan?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had any insight about, so I know that I think it's pretty much standard that we usually write contracts that limit our liability to the inspections fee. Now, if we wanted to go above and beyond what we agreed to in the contract, let's say we missed something, client called us about it, we went out, determined that we were negligent, and we decided we wanted to pay for that repair for the client, even if it costs more than the fee. Does that cause a legal problem where we're basically negating our own contract?
Well, I'm not. I'm not a lawyer,
Right.
so I can't. So I can't practice law in Virginia.
Okay.
What I can tell you is, if you get a full release for the entire inspection, that should take care of you. But that
Okay.
release has to be very carefully worded.
Yeah.
All
Thank you.
right,
Okay, good
Moving on.
questions.
Great.
Anything else?
I think that's good. We'll move on now.
Okay. This part of it always engenders some
Sure.
good questions. Okay. So the limitation of remedy, tort cases. Unless you've got specific wording in there to negate torts as a part of what they can get you on. That's why it's so important to have it worded that not only covers breach of contract, it covers torts and all of those kinds of issues, and nothing that you have in that contract can stop somebody else from suing you. So it would be the seller, the buyer's agent. There's all sorts of other people. So the contract and all that we've talked about is only a partial protection. It doesn't protect you from getting hauled in, and it doesn't really stop them even from suing you. What it can do is help you get out of it, but it doesn't stop you from getting hauled into court. Make the client accountable. This is one thing that I find very, very powerful. Give the client some things to do in the contract. Make client accountability part of the consideration. Remember, consideration is the exchange of value. One of the things that I have them, they are responsible for reading the seller's property disclosure statement and to tell me if they've got concerns. So if there was something in the spuds and they didn't communicate it to me, that's one of my possible defenses. It's their responsibility to ask questions if they don't understand something. It's their responsibility to read the report and act on the recommendations. Duh. But it's surprising how many times I say, well, did you read the report? No. Well, what am I supposed to do? Here it was in the report. I told you to do this. Did you do that? No. What do you want me to do? It's their responsibility to conduct a walkthrough before closing. But remember, and like I said, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV. Make sure you vet your agreement with an attorney. If it's not a local one, if you have E&O, at least run it through your E&O people. Okay. Any other questions on that part of the module before I rock on here? Hearing or seeing none. Let's move on. Just completed another great inspection. You have done everything. You have. You've looked at everything there is to look at. You've seen everything there is to see. You may have even used your X-ray vision to look behind the walls. You have been super inspector. That inspection was flawless. Here's the problem. Now you've issued a bad report. That is, an unprofessional report is kryptonite to the super inspector. It just takes out everything that you have just done, everything that has been so good about your inspection, and just chucks it out the window. Other people just, if all they have to look at is your report, they don't know how hard you worked, how long you took, everything that you did during the inspection. They don't know, and to them, it doesn't really matter. All they have to evaluate the entire service that you provided to your client is that inspection or report. Now, I don't want to diminish, the need to do a good inspection, because you can issue an absolutely brilliant report, but if you miss something, you've still got problems. But a bad report can wreak havoc on an otherwise good inspection. And that's why the report is such an important part of it. So what do you need to do in a report? This is according to the ASHI standard, all of what we're going to talk about is the ASHI standard. Most of your state standards contain the same basic elements. You must identify the deficiency. In other words, tell the client what you saw. You need to explain the implication of the deficiency. This is where so many reports fall down. These are all required elements. You need to tell the client why he should care about this deficiency. What to do next? You need to advise the client. That doesn't mean, design the fix. That doesn't mean tell them tell them how to do it. It means what is the next action that you should take. There are described requirements in the ASHI standard. There are usually described requirements in your state standards. Where you are required to describe something, you need to do it. These are the report elements. All of them are required. None of them are optional. So every single one of your defect statements should have these elements in it. If it does not, it's wrong. You are at risk. So, what does the standard say we are required to identify? Well, it's not functioning properly. That's one of the significantly deficient, unsafe, and near the end of service life. That's what we're looking for. These things: not functioning, deficient, unsafe, service life. So let's dig into the details. Not functioning properly. What does that mean? Well, it is a condition present and observable at the time of the inspection. That's the key. Because we all know, the minute you leave that house, things change. Conditions change. That system that was working perfectly, when you were there, the minute you pull out of the driveway, it can go kaflooey. So, it's not functioning at all. That's the easy one. It's not functioning as intended by the manufacturer. Example, you got a gas furnace, you got a yellow flame. Yeah, it's functioning, but not as intended by the manufacturer. Not performing its intended function. An example, you've got a floor joist that is bowed, is significantly deformed. Yeah, it's holding up the floor, but not as intended. Low functional flow or functional drainage. Yeah, you're maybe getting water out of that faucet, but it's coming out at a slow rate. It may be draining out of that sink, but it's draining really slowly. It's not functioning as intended. Significantly deficient. That's always been the kind of a problem for me, because we don't have a definition of that term, and that if I don't have something defined, it makes me nervous. This is something that the ASHI Standards Committee came up with years ago as a definition. Unfortunately, our attorney quashed it. So this is unofficial. A system or component functions properly during the inspection. So it works, but it lacks something, some essential quality that may prevent it from functioning properly under certain condition or at some future time. Something that's significantly deficient, may be functioning okay at the inspection. It may work for years. It may never fail, but it lacks something. There's a problem that under certain conditions, it may not work. So what are some possible examples of significantly deficient? Not installed per code, manufacturer's instructions, or industry standards. Now, please don't come back and say, well, we're not code inspectors. Agreed, we're not. We are not required to inspect for manufacturer's instructions or industry standards. These are just possible sources of information that you can use to identify something that is significantly deficient. It's not that you're required to do any of this. It's just ways, again, to justify your conclusion. It's deteriorated. Yeah, it may be functioning properly, but if there's deterioration, it may be a useful life issue. There are any number of possibilities. If it's damaged, same thing. It could be operating properly at the time, but that damage may keep it from operating properly under certain conditions or at some point in the future. Framing members with a large notch or hole. Okay, they may be still holding up the floor, but if you load those joists in a particular way, they may deflect or deform or fail under certain conditions. The old small wire gauge on the overcurrent device, number 14 copper on a 20 amp breaker. Yeah, it'll work until you put too much load on that wire. So that's significantly deficient. If the wood's too close to a heat source, it may have been that way for 50 years. But pyrolysis, at some point, that wood may catch fire. So yeah, it's okay. It's been okay for years, but it still could fail. It's significantly deficient. Unsafe. That's an interesting one too. There's the wording in the ASHI standard. First off, judged by the inspector. So it is your opinion. And that's a place where your opinion is okay and valid. So in your professional judgment, if something is unsafe, then if it meets the rest of this significant risk, it just can't be something that might happen in a 1 in a million shot. It's something that the risk has to be significant. Serious bodily injury. I interpret that to mean something that you're going to have to seek medical help for. And then normal day-to-day use. So abuse, something that doesn't happen during normal operation. These are the things you can use to determine whether something falls under the definition of unsafe. Significant risk, serious bodily injury, normal day-to-day use. The definition goes on then, due to accepted construction practices. Now, what the heck does that mean? Oh, what it doesn't mean is code. That's how it often was determined or defined or thought of in the past. Residential construction practices, could include code, but not necessarily. Examples, loose handrails or guards. on decks, those, that's an unsafe condition in my book. Wide baluster spacing, might be. Certainly it could be unsafe for children. Uneven riser height and tread depth. Stairs, unfortunately, we didn't get it too far into that, but that's, that 3/8 inch difference between riser heights and tread depths, that can be dangerous. The ledger attachment, nails only, that's unsafe in my book. Lack of safety glazing. Are we required to report safety glazing? Not in the ASHI standard, no. But if in your professional judgment, lack of safety glazing where it's currently required is unsafe, then you are completely within your rights to report that. So this is an example here. Is that unsafe? Note that this door swings out over the stairs. Is that an unsafe condition? In my book, it is. But to use that, you are going to have to step backward on these steps to open that door. You've got something in your hand. Say you've got a baby in your hand. You're climbing up those steps. You open that door, you step back, you lose your balance, you and the baby fall right down the stairs. Is that an unsafe condition? In my professional judgment as a home inspector, that's an unsafe condition. So I'm going to report that. So what's the bottom line here on unsafe? There is no grandfathering of safety deficiencies. So it doesn't matter to me whether it was code at the time it was built, whether it was standard practice in the area at the time it was built. It doesn't matter whether it was blessed by the parish priest when it was built. If it's unsafe now, it is unsafe. So if it presents if that condition in your professional judgment presents a significant risk of serious bodily injury in normal day-to-day use, then it is unsafe and you should report it. Let me pull up here just a second. Any questions, comments before we move on?
Yeah, Jim Hayes, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. And also, John Craner, I'm going to ask you to come on just to explain your comment that you made on the chat. So, Jim?
Accident. I had no question.
Okay. VZWP001, whoever you are. Next person has the hand up. Go ahead. All right. John, are you able to come on and just explain what you were saying there? John wrote a comment in the, and maybe Bruce, you would want to comment on it. John Craner said, not functioning, significantly deficient, unsafe, and near the end of life are all ASHI SOP requirements and not necessarily the same as what Virginia regulations require. Virginia regulations require we describe readily observable defects, just saying so folks understand. I guess my only thought on that is that we just want to make sure at least we include, in our agreements, what Virginia requires, and what Bruce is addressing here is going beyond talking about report writing and what we should be looking for and how we should be expressing it in our to our clients in the report.
Yeah,
I don't-
always state standards are going to take precedent over national, standard. Uh, it's really hard to comment on state standards, particularly when they seem to be significantly different. You know, when they might be less than the ASHI standard, if you go beyond that Virginia standard, you're just doing better, and you're doing better by your client. So there's no harm generally in going beyond standard. It's just that if you have a problem, they're going to judge you by the state standard.
Very good. Thanks, Bruce. Why don't we
Okay.
continue on?
We're not required to report age. That's a common misconception. End of service life does not mean reporting age. If you want to do it, God bless you, go for it. I do. For the water heater, and the furnace, but am I required to? No. And part of the problem is, end of service life is not necessarily age dependent. The world's best example of that is the condenser, on the beach or near the beach. Normal condenser service life, maybe around 15 years or so. On the beach, you're lucky to get 5. So that's one reason why age can be part of the end of service life equation, but it's not necessarily the entire equation. Service lives, this particular HUD document is a good place to go for some information about expected service lives. Okay. So we have the required elements. The first required element is to identify the deficiency. So when you're writing a defect statement, that defect statement identifying the deficiency should conform as exactly the fact. It should be accurate. It should be as precise and clearly stated as possible. This is the key. Remember, we're talking about information clients can use to make decisions. So it should be understandable, by the ordinary client, whatever that might be. And it should be complete. So, this example, what should you write in this example? Well, you observed an electrical device box that is supported only by one piece of conduit. You observed that the conduit is damaged. That's what you saw. Okay. Then let's go to implication. You have to explain why they should care. Now, in the ASHI standard, it's if not self-evident. Now, what I do, I have an implication statement on virtually all of my report statements, and that's because it's just the way I write them, really. because it's hard to really know what might be self-evident to the ordinary client. And this is the key here. The client needs to understand that implication to make good decisions. And they will whine if you don't have that implication. They'll say, yeah, you told me about it, but you didn't tell me. I didn't understand, that it was that bad. And you know what? They're going to win, or at least there's a really good chance they will win. So you could have told them about it. You could have told them to get it inspected, to have to have it looked at by somebody else, or whatever you tell them to do. But if you don't have this implication statement, they're going to whine that they didn't understand why. And since it is a required element, there's a good chance they'll win. They will try to hold you responsible without it. So look over every single one of your defect statements. If it doesn't have a good implication in it, you could lose. So, how do we write these? Well, a lot of times in writing, less is more. A short sentence is usually enough, in an implication or an explanation statement. Too much information, you don't want to go TMI on them, because that can be as bad as too little. If they get lost in that statement, they may not understand. And understanding, communication, is really what we're driving for. Now, if it's something unusual or complex, you might need 2 or 3 sentences, but in a lot of cases, one's going to do it. And make sure that you avoid language, specialized language, terms that people might not understand. So, I wish I had $1 for every one of these I've seen. I wouldn't need to crawl through crawl spaces anymore. So how do we, explain this? Well, what you report then, electrical wire splices or terminations not in an approved and covered box. That's what you saw. Fairly simple. What do you explain? It's an electrical shock and a fire ignition safety hazard. That's it. That's all. That's your implication statement. One simple sentence that your average ordinary client should be able to understand what an electric shock can do and what a fire can do. Simple, direct, understandable by the ordinary client. Another example, got a duct folded back on itself. That's wrong. So what do you report? Air conditioning supply duct severely constricted by a tight radius bend as the duct leaves the air handler. That's a succinct statement of what you saw. What's the implication? Constricted ducts reduce airflow, poor system performance, might increase operating cost, reduce service life. Your ordinary client should understand what all of these implications are. Now, do you need every single one of them? Not necessarily. But it's a good, simple way to explain the implication so that your ordinary client will be more likely to understand.
Quick question.
Okay.
In the 2 previous examples, I didn't see a recommendation as a course of action. Is that coming later?
It's coming later.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, patience, grasshopper. We shall get there. Good question. Yeah, they just had to get that garage door opener in. Improperly notched board or cut damaged beam. This is one I put in, because I like to try to put in context. You know, right now, assuming this is true, did not observe evidence of current deformation from this condition. And this is the next clause. However, deformation or failure could occur if conditions change. So that's your implication statement. You told them what you saw. You put it in context, which is not required, but in these types of situations, I like to do it. And that's your implication. It could deform or it could fail. Now, Scott asked about what do you advise them to do? And that's the third piece, and he's absolutely right. So what is the next action? You can correct, often expressed either as repair or replace. Personally, I don't like that language. Repair or replace gets a little too close to designing the fix for my comfort level. There are other ways to do it. We'll talk about it. So you can recommend that the deficiency be corrected. You can recommend that they monitor the deficiency. You can recommend to have it evaluated by somebody else. In the ASHI standard, those are your three options. Pick one as the as what you want to recommend. I get nervous about repair and replace. Say this this should be repaired. Well, what if that's not an option or not the best option? What if replace is not the best option? That's why I don't like that wording. We don't want to do anything that could be interpreted as recommending a specific course of action. I use the term, I recommend action be taken by somebody. And that will depend on who it is, but the appropriate specialist, and let the specialist determine the appropriate action. So in the correct, say you think that is the appropriate advice, that this defect should be corrected. Well, you're going to use that for the not functioning properly, significantly deficient, and unsafe things that you're looking for. This is how I word it. Recommend action, if any, as recommended by a qualified, whatever type of contractor or engineer. So that's, that's that's the way I word mine. So, in the case, let's say it's an HVAC problem, then I'd recommend action, if any, as recommended by the qualified HVAC contractor.
Bruce, can I ask a question? I think many of us, as you also, have been on an inspection. The client is with you, you identify an issue, and they ask, well, what should I do about that? Or what does that mean? And how in agreement are you with what you are saying there face to face versus what you actually put in a report?
Well, that's a very good question, and you can be more liberal about what you say in verbally than you can in writing, because basically the report is what you will be judged by. Now you have to be careful about what you say, and I always preface anything that I say that gets close to trying to design the fix as saying, I'm not designing the fix. I'm just, you've asked the question. These are some possible ways of doing it, but I don't have all the information at this point. So I really can't answer the question about what should be done. Somebody needs to come in, do a more thorough analysis of the situation, and then come to a conclusion and a recommendation about what to do next. Does that kind of answer the question, Alex?
It definitely does. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
I would just, if you don't mind, Bruce, I would just take that thought a step further and say that, when we make a recommendation for further evaluation, I don't think we should stop there. We should say, and then take and then act on that third party recommendation.
You're exactly right, Hollis. And that's why I worded as recommend action as recommended by the contractor. So yeah, action is the key here. So you are absolutely right. Because it doesn't do a whole lot of good unless the contractor says, which he might, particularly in engineering related issues. Engineer comes in and says, hey, no problem. Then fine, the monkey is now on the engineer's back. It's not on your back. And one of the objectives is to, if we can, make that monkey jump to somebody else's back. It's unfortunate that we have to live that way, but it's the way it is. I define qualified. He said it said by a qualified whatever. Well, I define that term in my report. Qualified means at minimum licensed, and it means with some relevant experience. Because I think I read somewhere in the chat, you don't need to be competent to be licensed. And that is very true. Experience does help competency. It doesn't guarantee it, but at least it helps. So what about monitor? End of service life is a really good use of monitor. It's or something that doesn't rise to the level of being deficient, but you've got that sneaking suspicion that it might become deficient in the near future. Those are the two best places for monitor. This is how I word it. Water heater's about 14 years old. It's near the end of its service life. Water heaters of this age can fail or leak at any time. Budget for replacement in the near future. That's a good monitor type of statement. This is one I use for cracks in brick veneer and mortar. Do not believe it's a current concern. Recommend monitoring and evaluation by a qualified contractor. If the cracks increase in quantity, size, show displacement. So I like, where possible, I like to give the client something to monitor for. it doesn't do the client a whole lot of good to say, well, yeah, you got a crack in the mortar, monitor it. Okay, what am I looking for? Well, these are some of the things you're looking for. And, if it gets worse, have somebody come in and look at it. Remember, we're giving clients information they can use and they can act on to make good decisions. Now, monitor tends to get overused, I think. And I think a lot of inspectors believe this too. So don't use it to try to foist risk back on the client. It's not going to work anyway, and you're not serving your client. Don't downplay it. Don't use monitor if you're afraid of ticking off an agent by saying correct it, or have it evaluated. Don't use monitor to cover up your uncertainty. Now, here's a very important point. It's okay to say, I don't know. Completely okay. In fact, smart. There are, I've written gazillion books on this stuff. There are things I don't know. I wouldn't know a boiler if it came up and bit me in the 6. I have always practiced in areas where there aren't any boilers. If I ever go in and find a boiler, I'm going to do the best I can. And I'm going to say, get it looked at by somebody else. This isn't something I do.
Hey, Bruce, there's a hint on that. The boilers heat water.
Yeah, thank you.
Just in case you didn't know.
Yeah, yep, that's very good. That's very good. Sometimes they heat it a little bit for a hot water boiler, and sometimes they heat it a lot for a steam boiler. So you're absolutely right. Thank you. Evaluate. When do you use that? Well, need more information or expertise to determine what action, go back to Hollis's point, that the client should take. And in a lot of cases, this is going to be true. All you're going to see are maybe indications of a problem, but you don't know what the problem is. You don't know where it's coming from. More information or more expertise is necessary. If that's the case, then great. Tell them to get it evaluated. There's evidence, but the deficiency is concealed. The perfect example of this is the water stain. A water stain is not a deficiency. It's evidence of a deficiency. The deficiency itself is where the water is coming from, if it's still coming. So you're going to need, if all you see is a stain, that it's going to need to be evaluated to determine the source of the water and to determine if that source is still active. There's evidence, but confirmation requires that infamous technically exhaustive evaluation. What does technically exhaustive mean? It means somebody's got to come in and do more than you're capable of doing, or use instruments that you don't have. The perfect example of that is the bad delta T for your air conditioning. Yeah, you get a 10-degree delta T. It needs to be evaluated. That's the something unfamiliar. Yes, boilers do heat water, but that's I'm not going to go a whole lot further than that because I just don't see them that often. Don't use evaluate to foist risk. Don't use it to cover up your uncertainty. Please don't use evaluate and have it everything be evaluate. In that case, you are not serving your client. Evaluate is not to be used if you just don't know. Just say, I don't know, admit it, and move on. So if if a monitor and evaluate, just ask yourself, are these the right recommendations for the client? Yeah. If it is, use them. Are you doing it to somehow protect your six? Well, then maybe you need to go to correct and just say what needs to happen.
Hey, Bruce, let me just interject something here, because I've agreed with everything you've said so far until right here, where you're saying don't use evaluate to cover up your uncertainty, just simply admit that you don't know. Well, isn't that when you ask for a third party is when you don't know? I mean, it's outside the scope of my knowledge base. That doesn't mean I'm deficient. It just means I'm limited, and therefore you should bring in someone who has that level of expertise. So we are.
Well, in one sense, you're right. The point I'm trying to make here is don't use it for everything. There are inspectors who say every single defect statement says evaluate. And that's the point I'm trying to make. But your point is well taken too. And I agree. Does that kind of clarify what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, that's helpful. I just want to make sure, have you address that, and I think you did. Fine, thanks.
Okay, describes.
Sir, can I ask the question?
Sure.
You talking about evaluate. As an example, yesterday we had two chimneys in poor repair or needed to be repaired. And I put in my statement in my inspection report, have a qualified chimney company come evaluate and repair chimneys, the chimney. Are you saying that that's a wrong use of the word evaluate?
No, not at all. In fact, I use similar wording all the time. They're going to have, it's when you stop at evaluate and you use it for everything. There are a lot of situations where where somebody's going to have to come in, evaluate the situation, and determine what to do. Now, I would not use the term repair because that may not be the right action. The chimney may need to be replaced.
Well,
you just don't know.
Well, that was the reason why I was using the word evaluate, because to me, the chimney, actually both chimneys, appeared to be to the point where both actions would work. Either tear it down and replace it, or repair it, purge it. Excuse me. And so I use evaluate in those type of situations.
Absolutely. It's just where you use my problem with evaluate is using it, as a stopping point.
Oh,
but
okay.
I use that term a lot, but it's in, recommend, evaluation by X and action as recommended by X.
Right. That's the way I use it. And, but I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page.
Exactly the same page. Because like I say, in most cases, in order to get to that best action, somebody's going to have to come in and evaluate it. So yeah, all good. All
We have a
good.
question from Anthony Kelly.
Yeah, go for it and unmute yourself. Because unfortunately I don't read lips. So
My question is, there is a class of things that we see every day of the week, which
Anthony, your audio is such that I can't understand you.
okay, really drop.
I think it's a microphone problem. Okay,
Okay.
move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just by the way, Bruce, we have about 20 minutes just to help
Yep.
you pace.
Well, we'll rock as far as we can go.
Okay.
Okay. So, descriptions. This is one thing we got into the last time we rewrote the ASHI standards. Why describe? Some people believe it provides useful information. Some people believe that it shows you looked at the components. So that's kind of on the plus side. On the minus side, in the vast majority of cases, nobody cares about the description. And if you make a mistake in the description, it can and will be used against you in a court of law, and you don't get any Miranda warnings. I think if it were solely up to me, I would probably do away with descriptions, but it's not solely up to me. And I guess it doesn't matter. And yeah, here's a really good example of a pitfall. This is a kind of oddball type of hardboard siding that was the basis of a insurance claim against the inspector. The problem with it is, I think he described this as fiber cement siding. Now, despite the fact that it's pretty obvious that it's not, that's how he described it. Now, the problem with it is it clearly isn't. The unfortunate part was that this siding is not made anymore. It was an oddball local type of siding, and that manufacturer went out of business. So guess who got the honor and privilege of paying to reside that entire house? Not because there was a defect with the material, because he improperly described that siding. So, just good object lesson. Ronald, did you have your hand back up or just forget to take it down? Apparently forgot to take it down. Okay, let's rock on here. So descriptions, sufficient detail to distinguish the component from similar components. That's kind of how you're supposed to do it. So, just examples, plastic, not sufficient to describe water pipe, water distribution. It should be whatever it is, PEX, CPVC, whatever it is, you have to be more specific. Siding, just calling it wood, unless it really is, insufficient. If a good plywood panel, hardboard lap, whatever it is, it needs to be that describe sufficient detail to distinguish the component from similar components. As long as we're required to describe, we need to do it according to the definition. So energy source, gas, that's acceptable. It would be better probably if it's natural gas to say that, or propane if it's that, because just gas does not distinguish the type. Cooling system, central air, no. It's a forced air split system, air source condenser, outside evaporator coil connected to furnace inside. Why air source condenser? Because there are water source condensers. Okay, I'm gonna go just take a quick moment and any questions or comments? Yes, Edward.
Sorry, it takes a second. Just a really quick question. This is probably a really basic question too, but I'm just going to go to hypothetical. Let's say I'm inspecting a deck and it has no joist hangers and its ledger board is nailed and the handrails are falling apart and the stairs don't, it's just got everything wrong with it. You're taking 1,000 photos of this thing. And when you write a report, that deck as an entity, do you itemize this problem? Then the next one is this problem, then the next thing is this problem, or do you just say, here's a line item and then bullet point a few of the things, because you're going to be calling out for a decking contractor, that's happening. At what point do we say, okay, fine, I've told you enough, now this thing truly does need to be evaluated, put it on somebody else?
Generally, what I do in those situations, I have a report comment in a lot of areas that says basically, this system presents numerous defects. The entire system needs to be evaluated by the appropriate specialist and action accordingly. I print it in red.
Yeah, I mean, because decks is, we were talking about decks earlier.
Yeah.
Decks, I would say 1 out of 100 doesn't have a problem. Like most of them have multiple issues. And, it's one thing, it's like, oh, this deck's mostly good, but it was built at a time when joist hangers weren't a thing. But when you're dealing with a deck decks especially are the worst. No joist hangers, spacers too big, no, just the list goes on and on and on. It gets exhausting writing them as individual line items. And then the reality is it's not fair to your client because no, it wouldn't cost, this much to do that and this much to do that and this much to do that. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars to get this thing repaired properly. So it makes more sense to be one item line with some examples and then have an evaluation done, right?
Well, you have to make your own individual decision about when to do that. I tend to, on most decks, I list them out individually. If it's really bad, I would also either also or in again. There's no one right answer to this. So you have to make your own real decision. But yes, at some point, it's fair to say, this thing's a mess. Get the whole system evaluated. And that's, they say, since there's no one right answer, it's really hard to answer it specifically.
That sounds good. Thanks, Bruce.
Uh,
So we still have time. Got another 10 minutes or so.
Okay, well, let's go beyond the requirements then. The limitation statements, those are so important. They are absolutely critical. You need to be specific about your limitation statements. Your general statements, as a general rule, will get thrown out. You need to explain why it was not inspected. That's part of the ASHI standard. And even if it's not part of the Virginia standard, you still need to do it just for your own protection. I make them easy to find. I print them in a different color ink And I tend to group my limitation statements together. Not always, but in a lot of cases, because since they are so critical, you don't want the client coming back and saying, I didn't see it. So be specific about the location. Just I didn't enter the crawl space. Well, what part of the crawl space didn't you enter? 1/4 in the right side was not inspected due to low clearance. So specifically where you didn't inspect and why. Warn that deficiencies may exist. There are cases where the inspector told them, I didn't inspect this. And the client came back and said, well, yeah, you told me, but you didn't tell me that there might be deficiencies in there. And guess what? They won. Recommend that they be inspected. So yeah, I didn't inspect the right quarter of the crawl space because of low clearances. There may be deficiencies that I didn't see in that area. Get it inspected. Even though there may be no practical way to do it, you still need to make that statement, because clients have come back and said, yeah, you told me, yeah, you warned me that deficiency, but you didn't tell me to get it inspected. Well, it's kind of like, duh. But guess what? They won. Oops. So basically, that's what I recommend to you as the elements of a good limitation statement. Be specific, warn them that deficiency may exist, and recommend that they get the area, the system, or whatever inspected. Every single one of your limitation statements should contain those elements to both inform your client and to protect you. I have this in my report introduction, because a lot of that can get really tiresome. Basically what I say is that don't express a finding about condition of operation of components that are concealed, shut down, inaccessible. These components may present deficiencies when evaluated. We recommend evaluation by the specialist. If you want assurance, destructive measures may be required. Significant or costly deficiencies could exist. So that's what I put in my report introduction, and just tell them, every single limitation statement, this applies. And sometimes I'll put this in the limitation statement too. Example, didn't enter some areas of the crawl space because it didn't satisfy our definition. The areas not inspected include the right quarter of the crawl space was not inspected due to low clearance. Recommend evaluation during the due diligence period. Provide citations for your recommendations. It helps the client. It gives your recommendation more weight. Your opinion, some people may take it. Builders, sellers, they're going to push back. So if possible, provide citations. A citation should be an independent, authoritative source. Manufacturer's instructions are excellent. Industry standards, excellent. Code, excellent, but don't call it code. I use the term current recommended current accepted standards recommend that. And then sometimes I'll just cut and paste right out of the code. But I haven't called it code. And that's the important thing, particularly here in North Carolina, where they'll do all sorts of unspeakable things to inspectors who cite code. It's against our regulations. Report the location. Say, good idea, not required. Cut those phone calls off. Sometimes you may want to mark it. That's really going to be situational.
Sir,
Yes.
we actually have a company here in Winchester that one of their promotions are, we will come out and bring it's a home inspection company. We will come out and bring your home up to code. And also too, one of their big things is they don't make recommendations. I have a couple of their reports here on my desk that they actually don't use the word code. They use this is required. And I was wondering what you thought about that since you brought the word up code.
Well, I wish them well. Eventually they're likely to get sued out of business.
How long have they been around? My gosh.
Yeah,
Well, the company that's one of my competitors, he's been in business about 5 years. And the other one that uses the word required, this is required almost on every page as a report. He's been around about 15, 16 years.
like I said, sooner or later, they are liable to get sued out of existence. But bad idea. But like a lot of things, you can go on for a long time until you don't. And just as soon as a halfway decent attorney gets a hold of one of those, it's all she wrote.
Bruce, let's see how far you can get in 5 minutes.
Well, I have a race here.
Yeah.
So computer generated reports, yeah, okay. Pictures, absolutely. And don't tell me that pictures are going to show something that you didn't see. If you didn't see it, that's kind of over to you. Good grammar, that's always a good idea. Make it professional. Don't contradict yourself. I want to read this one because it's such a classic. There's a house has screw jacks placed under a few rooms. Jacks are used to help that the bounce out of floor with large furniture. Okay. Footings for these jacks are very nice. Oh, okay. Footings are made of concrete with steel bars. How did he know that? Screw jacks will rust out in this area and will need to be replaced with cement blocks in the future. Recommend having a contractor review them. Well, they just said, yeah, everything is really cool. Although it is quite contradictory. Then he recommends that you have a contractor review it. Really? Now, boilerplate, it comes from the report writing companies. It's kind of what can you say? If it educates and informs, it informs about the limitation. It's fine, but just kind of cut most of the boilerplate out. And remember, with boilerplate that comes from the report companies, if you put it in your report, you own it. If it's right, it's wrong, you own it. So don't necessarily put the boilerplate from the companies in. May be great, may not be. May not apply to your situation. It may not apply in your area. Just be real careful of vendor boilerplate. And you know, a 60-page report where a 40-page report will do, not good. You want to set your client's expectations. So you incorporate the standard into the report. You say, I reported, I used the Virginia standard. Now, home inspections don't eliminate risk. It's important that your client understand that. Home inspections are visual, non-invasive. Things may break right after you leave. I put all of these things in the introduction section of my report. I'm trying to set the client's expectations. You get 10 inspectors in the room and show them a picture of a defect, you will get at least 11 different responses. Different inspectors are going to see things differently. What do your terms mean? Define them. If you use these types of terms, then in your report, define what they mean. Because otherwise, there's going to be questions, and if it goes to court, guess who gets to make that definition? At least it's probably going to be the plaintiff's attorney. Acceptable means the component function as intended during inspection. Acceptable conditions, normal wear and tear. Components may present cosmetic and functional deficiencies. That's one of the ways I do it. So until Alex gives me the hook, we're going to play defect recognition and reporting. Oops.
Why don't we take two more minutes, and then I think we'll have to. This will give us some examples here.
Okay. So normally I would ask, what does this show? This shows fire has been in the place. We observed damage framing, fire damage. That's what we saw. Fire can significantly weaken wood, cause deformation or failure. It's out of scope to determine whether the repairs were acceptable. Recommendation, ask the sellers for documentation. The repairs were designed by a qualified engineer and implemented according to a building permit. If the documentation is not available, then it requires engineering evaluation. And I want to make a particular note of this. We talked a little bit about it in the deck section. Recommending a permit check is an extremely powerful recommendation. It can save you. It can get you off the hook, and it does provide information clients can use. So what if you come in and see this? Basically, we've got some repairs made to a foundation wall. Foundation wall repairs, out of scope to determine whether they're adequate and properly installed. Recommend, again, documentation that repairs were designed, implemented under a building permit. Same basic thing. I was actually asked by one of your august people up there in Virginia, is it required to note repairs? Well, you can argue that point, probably not. But is it part of the standard of care? If you see something like that, absolutely. Is it smart? Absolutely.